Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Keeping It Behavior, where we are empowering parents one episode at a time and breaking down behavior analytic topics to what they look like in the real world. My name is Ray Trank, and though I'm missing my beautiful co-host tonight, I'm very excited to introduce you guys to a very special guest. So we have the amazing Rachael White on our podcast today. She's a board certified behavior analyst, educator, and advocate who helps families and children move from the stress of meal times to curiosity, confidence, and connection. For nearly 2 decades, she's partnered with families to build meaningful skills and autonomy with a focus today on autism, pediatric feeding disorder, ARFID, and family-centered care. Because for Rachael, mealtimes aren't just about food, they're about opportunities for learning, connection, and belonging. So hello, Rachael, welcome.
Thanks, Ray. That's such a sweet introduction. That's
Yeah.
very kind. Thank you.
We are so, I say we, the
Yeah,
imaginary
no,
guest
I
being
know.
is so we're just so happy to have you on today because feeding is something that impacts so many families. And I think what's so amazing about you and your experience is you're tying in the behavioral lens to everything that you're doing while also meeting compassion and respecting other disciplines approaches. So I guess just to begin, let's just start with your origin story, kind of what got you here, because this is not a typical path, right? You started at Texas Star Academy,
Mm.
then UNT, then Easter Seals. How did you get started and what led you to Up Beet Eaters?
Yeah, I loved and I enjoyed my journey a ton. I was very lucky to land where I did. I had a great advisor tell me, "Hey, I know you want to be a forensic psychologist, but why don't you pivot to another community?" Because I'd been in the traumatic brain injury community for so long. And I chose the autism community, worked at Texas Star and slash DFW Center for Autism, and didn't even realize what a world I had landed in, right? Like, so having DFW Center for Autism, Texas Star Academy was a inclusive preschool setting. So it was really, really neat to be learning natural and developmental behavior interventions. By short, they call them NDBIs. But I didn't realize until much later that that wasn't a part of everybody's um, education in ABA. And so really appreciating that lineage
Mm.
of practitioners and research is important to me.
Yeah.
And said, okay, what is this behavior analysis? I love it. And
Yes.
so went into UNT and had just amazing advisors, now colleagues and friends. Um, I guess short story on that is please be involved if you're a clinician or a student, like be involved in as many labs as you can because that comprehensive perspective is so
Yeah.
helpful. Um, and then while I was getting my master's at UNT, I was also working at Easter Seals, North Texas. And I think the cool thing that I got from um, the my time at Texas Star Academy was it wasn't just about NDBI interventions. It wasn't
Right.
about, only pivotal response teaching or only enhanced milieu teaching or only incidental teaching. It was just, or discrete trial teaching. It was about all these interventions and under what context and conditions that it was particularly helpful for that kid or that family in that context and community. So it's all these great questions. And then, my time at UNT and Easter Seals solidified that.
Wow.
Um, we were encouraged to do the same thing at Easter Seals. Sometimes I hear people practicing in clinics and they have a particular strategy or framework that they like cling to. And I
Yes.
thought, gosh, like 20 years ago, we just didn't at least at the two centers I grew up in, right? Like that wasn't the perspective. The perspective was we have a massive tool belt. Not every one of them is perfect for any particular kiddo in a particular,
Individualized.
setting and condition. Yeah. Yeah.
Individualized. And that's
Yeah.
actually, I mean, you're tying into a beautiful thing Arya had talked about too. That's the beauty, I think, of working in those settings, which for those that don't know, Rachael was an awesome advocate and support and model and everything for Arya. Arya like attributes so
Oh,
much to your learning or your teaching. I mean, she learned so
yeah.
much under you. And um she was talking a little bit about just the inclusive model and how, Easter Seals really was ahead of its time in its approach in the interdisciplinary supports that were in place,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
how they provided care, like you said, really making sure that we are taking into account, like you said, our full tool belt and then applying
Hmm.
that to fit whatever needs exist for that individual learner. And you're right, that's not something that really exists outside, I feel like, of the field typically. So it's cool that that was at the forefront of that kind of approach to therapy.
Right. And I think, well, Ari and I will talk about this a lot. Like we have, at Easter Seals, we had this connection, and it wasn't just two amazing colleagues and families that we learned from. She always gives me a lot of credit as teaching her, but I think at Easter Seals, because it was so interdisciplinary and or multidisciplinary, sorry, and then collegiate, that we really just, it was a big, massive pod and network of us learning together. And so it was also connected to the University of North Texas. So it's like, we had this big streamline, and then our advisors, um, and two of our biggest advisors, a lot of us that were shaped by Dr. Shala Ali Rosales and Dr. Jesus Rosales Ruiz, were our clinical, we had like a human rights committee review, and they were part of that committee. And it's like, how lucky, people go to have their master's and then they go on to get their PhD. And, we got our master's and then we stayed in that community another 10 years. So it's like we had
So beautiful.
multiples of multiples degrees almost given to us through this
Truly,
connection. Yeah.
truly.
And all those students coming from it were so cool.
Right.
So many, again, like, yes, supervising and supervisor and supervisee hierarchies exist, but the caliber of students coming from the program and coming to work with us for families they were bigger, they had bigger questions. Like their questions were not about they were super focused on the families and the kid. It wasn't about, sometimes students can come in with a set project, and it's cool. We've
Right.
all
And a
been
set
there.
way of doing things. They're like, I
Yeah.
have to be by the book because how do I
Yes.
do this particular strategy or this particular procedure? you know and that's something I talked about with Aria too, where it's like she inspired me so much through her guidance to think outside the box, because when all is like textbook DTT screech
Yeah.
child training for the families listening. So essentially I'm delivering an instruction, I'm giving you a card, a cue, we're sitting at a table.
Mhm.
If that's all it is like a shock to your system to see people doing things totally differently, and you're like, wait, but that's not right. But
Yeah.
actually, it is right because that's how our science is actually designed to be, is individualized. So,
Yep. Well, and I
yeah.
just love to like it's cool to see a lot of the students come in with this experimental framework, right? And then they come
Yes.
into these different clinics with us in those moments and they're just like, yeah, that overwhelmed, that wash of like overwhelming, like, oh my gosh, how do I
Like,
take
that's not
that
right. Yeah.
strategy and then apply it to this environment, which has none of the supports in place for any of that, like
Literally, exactly.
real
Yes.
world issues.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Well, so speaking of, working
mhm.
with other types of professionals, so one of the things that you talked about, or you have talked about a lot with us outside of this, and also just on your website, and you talked about having your foot in eight bags, right? So you're in a lot of different areas. You have a lot of different influences for the way that you approach feeding therapy.
Yeah.
So as you're kind of looking at that, how do you navigate that with all these different perspectives?
Yeah, I think that's been a massive mission of mine that and with the organizations I work with, I have to say I found them because they share that mission.
Mhm.
So gosh, that's such an intense question, but I think the the biggest I think the most direct way is to say like as BCBAs or any, BTs or RBTs, we have such a great evidence-based like a library base, if you will, right? So we hear like, this is evidence-based, evidence-based. And I think we can forget that every discipline has a library of evidence-based research.
Right.
And so I think what I love doing, I'm working on a project right now that's looking at like developmental psychology, feeding therapy, um, and behavior analysis. And across
You're
those
so
three,
cool. That's so cool.
it's
Yeah.
like it's forced, but it is fascinating too, right? And it's
Yes.
like it's mission oriented because it's families too. Like they shouldn't be doing all this translational work.
Right.
They should be able to kind of have this clear, unified framework that they can kind of ebb and flow, whatever their individual needs are. And so it's like,
Mhm.
I want other clinicians to know that it just, our research has come up our lane and they have a research that comes up their lane. And if you look at it, even down to like time periods, like within a decade, a lot of this research is paralleling each other. We're all kind of
Mm.
coming to these similar pathways. And I think
Yeah.
it's so fascinating how, for instance, amazing colleague, but she's an occupational therapist, right? Like the elephant in the room is that you say OT or speech and ABA or BCBA, and we're all like, ugh, like
Immediately, it's visceral.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's visceral. Yes, that's such a
Yeah.
great word. And again, those organizations I work with are really great at that mission alignment. All of them have. Texas Star was great. Easter Seals was wonderful about that. Now Feeding Matters, who I work with now, is
Yeah.
wonderful about that. And so you have these clinicians that are mission focused to help that family. Like the family is that core center, not the particular discipline. And I think it's so neat. Um, a colleague reached out and said, "Hey, I don't know what your sessions look like, but I would love to have you come watch my session. Tell me where we align and where we don't align." And I thought, what a cool invitation from
Yeah.
another clinician, right? And I watched, and the neatest thing is that our sessions, she's an occupational therapist, I'm behavior analyst, our sessions almost, aside from the environment, because she had a cute little gym session area, and then
Wouldn't it be
usually
nice if we had all that too? Oh my gosh.
I know,
Please. I
I
want to
know,
steal that. Yeah, that's great.
right? But like, I'm in the home mostly, and she's got her
Yeah.
gym and clinic, and
Yeah.
but they were paralleled the whole time. Like we were
Yeah.
both starting with that relationship. We were mirroring, we were engaging, we were being responsive, and then we were making sure to educate along the way. So it's just like two different fields, different evidence bases, but we're getting to the same point. So like why and where's that connect and disconnect and helping. I think I want other clinicians to do a better job at seeing the parallels instead of finding the differences and just picking at
Right.
them, right?
Right. And it's interesting too, Justine and I have talked about this before, where there's a certain degree of case protectiveness that is almost like inherent to the field of applied behavior analysis, where even if others come in and give you suggestions, somehow, we take that personally. And I think that is a huge area of growth, I think, across our field that we could be better about, because being open and being forever students works to the benefit of our children and our families who we
Yeah.
are dedicated to serving. So, I mean, I think that's incredible. And the fact that you found, feeding matters and, you're involved in that. So, what motivated you to help found a state council within the network?
Oh yeah.
Speaking
Okay,
of.
well let me this journey is so
Hey,
um
I'm with you. I'm buckled in. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I was about to say, so Feeding Matters, I'll start there, is a nonprofit organization. It's got like four pillars of kind of advocacy that it wants to work on educating families in pediatric feeding disorders, ARFID along the way. ARFID's part of it, but
Mhm.
its primary focus initially was pediatric feeding disorder. It wants to, advocate for families. It wants to build networks of multidisciplinary care. And
A
it always wants to
mouthful, isn't
remain,
that?
yeah,
That's what I'm always like. I'm like gargling my words on that one every time I say it.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, and like, I'll get there in a minute, but yeah. So I think as a behavior analyst, our research is very strategy specific, which
Yeah.
strategy works better than this strategy. And it's like it'll pull from other disciplines too. Like, okay, is discrete trial better than incidental? Is discrete trial, is escape extinction better than SOS? Like
Yeah.
it's always about kind of compare and contrast, which
Mm.
sure, science moves that way. But I think I am more interested in like how relationships are the foundation of and are the foundation to those sessions, and then where do the strategies come in within that, right? And
Yeah.
like um so I think when I was trying to build this practice, I was saying, like, yes, I see our evidence-based research, but I also see all these other evidence-based research from all these other disciplines. And I'm supposed to know how to guide families through this. But how can I be responsible to that mission
Hmm.
if I don't know a little bit more about all those other disciplines? And at the time, there's all this marketing and stuff about your business, like say these terms, say picky eating, say um, you know, the, say behavior problems, say behavior challenges. And I was just like, that's just not how I've grown up as a behavior analyst. It's always been constructional and skill based, not pathological or, the behavior problems. That wasn't
Yeah,
ever my focus. If there was a behavior problem, then it was a communication of something that I could better articulate as a development need and then progress from
absolutely.
there.
Hmm.
And so I think I typed in, um, I think I legit Googled, I don't like the word picky eating because it puts the onus on the kid and on the
It does.
person. And
No,
then
but that's a good call out. So you're like, how can I communicate this thing without using that verbiage? Because there is an
yeah,
association with it that, like you said, places fault. Yeah.
yeah. And I'd already gotten used. I was like, well, I mean, I'm not going to be a good marketer. Like, I get that. That's just not my moment. But at least
Okay,
like,
but for those who haven't checked out her website and looked at everything, it is so
ah,
cute. It is
that's
so cute. If I saw that, I'd be like, yes. If I were a parent, I'd
ah.
be like, I gotta go with her.
You
It's
guys are
amazing.
sweet. But no, and so I think I legit Googled, I don't like the word picky eating, or what do I do about
What
picky
do you
eating?
use? Yeah.
I don't want to use it. Put me somewhere else. Connect me with
Yeah.
other people. And I found this website called It's Not Picky Eating, which is a sister website.
There
And
we
and
go.
now I know it's now part of Feeding Matters. Feeding
Yeah.
Matters has been around 20 years, started in Arizona, and now it's national and they have an international conference now. So it's expanded so beautifully, and I'm so proud of it as a organization. And so getting, if a pillar of my business was to connect other disciplines with the same mission, then when I Googled this and found out Feeding Matters had done the work for me, I
Yeah.
was so thankful. And so I think I just wanted to extend and give back to that connection and say, okay, if these, so Feeding Matters also as an organization has these chapters, if you will, but it's per
Mhm.
state. A state can create a council, which is like, a state-based networking and
It's
resource
incredible.
provisions,
Yeah.
advocacy, right? And so I was like, wait, Texas doesn't have one? We're massive, and we have so many rural and city pockets, and all those are going to be
Yeah.
service deserts. And families in North Dallas have a hard enough time. I can't imagine like Tyler or
Yeah.
Beaumont, like so I just was like, okay, I don't I don't know what business I have doing this, but if you don't have it, I'm here for it.
And I
So
love that. I love how you're just tying in the value that every, perspective brings to the table and that coming together, we're working toward a greater mission. Um, and also you're right too, taking on the responsibility of disseminating research of all these different disciplines for a family is not only daunting, but
yeah.
you wouldn't be able to do it service, right? Because, you're a behavior analyst and of course you have, a lot of experience in different fields, but knowing how to break those down for families and make it, everything marry together. I think it's amazing to have that team-based and collaborative perspective because I agree with you, like what you were saying prior. That's something I think everyone in our fields could, take a page out of your book there, where we are open to those conversations. We're coming with curiosity, and we put pride and sometimes our science aside for a second so that we can be listeners and learners. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's way more powerful because you're looking at what the family needs. And so I think that's beautiful.
Well, like it's
Yeah.
cool what you said too, really fast, because you said, like I always said it that way, and I just heard it and what you said, and I was like, oh well, wait, because like I'll say like, oh, okay, here's ABA. Let me just zero in on what a registered dietitian would say right now, or like I would try to do that perspective building,
Yeah.
and then I realized But that is the work of that is the science, right? It's like observing those patterns. It's translational, but but like it is exactly what we do. So now, like again, I like literally just heard that in what you said, but it is our science, so we don't even have to put it aside. We can just use it from another
Yeah.
layer. Like,
Yeah, and that goes for so many things too. Like if
yeah,
you even think about, initially when Ascent was introduced into our field, people were like, well, that's not ABA. Well, but actually it is. Everything that we're doing with Ascent mirrors exactly what the values of ABA are. We're building up self-advocacy skills. We're being affirming. We're trying to work with the needs of an individual to make them successful where they feel safe. And so I think it's the same thing with, taking a step out and listening to other providers and being open to that. We're all it fits perfectly with our science. Exactly. So I think that that's such a good call out. Um, Kind of going into the feeding disorders specifically, because I know a lot of our families who are listening to this podcast, they may be at the very beginning of
yeah.
recognizing that their child or loved one has some feeding difficulties, right?
Mhm.
So I wanted to start off with just a foundational explanation, if you wouldn't mind, specifically talking about the difference between a pediatric feeding disorder
Mhm.
and ARFID, because I know that we kind of throw those words around a lot, but people don't
Yeah.
really know the difference between the two.
Yeah. And it's that on that lack of awareness is also its thing on its own. So I'll explain
Yeah.
that too. So we have feeding and eating disorders, and I think most people are familiar with like bulimia and anorexia nervosa, right? And so that's their own space.
Right.
We're going to put them over here because both PFD and ARFID, neither of them have anything to do with like self-image and things like that.
Right.
But you've got so ARFID, you've got avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, and that was, gosh, it's only been 2013 that that's become a disorder on its own in the DSM-5.
That's
Before the
actually kind
DSM,
of mind blowing.
oh,
So
it gets
recent.
even more mind-blowing. Okay,
Yeah.
so so see, I don't
You're
know
like, just
why.
wait.
I know. I don't know why I'm getting goosebumps over this, but I think it's so fascinating that we're on this like cusp and need of advocacy, and it's so neat to be on like this massive first wave. Um, can't believe I'm nerding out about
No, please.
diagnosis
This is what we
definition.
love too, because we're learning. Like, I want to be a forever student too, and
Yeah.
feeding
Well,
and sleep are two things that
oh
fascinate
gosh.
me. Like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, if I could just like take some time away and just be an expert on those two things,
Yeah.
they're core basic needs, of
Hmm.
every human being, they impact quality of life immensely. So anyway.
Yeah. No, I sleep if it's funny, like everybody says, like, oh, your behavior analysis, you should be a great parent. And that's no, we can't. It's hard to evaluate your own behavior,
Right?
right? So
Yes.
sleep training was a disaster in our house. So,
Oh,
there you go.
listen, if I get tips on anything in the future, you can pass them on, then we'll be all experts on sleep. It'll be great.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll help with meal times, but I'm
Yeah,
not
there we go. Yeah.
nowhere near bedtime for me
Right.
from my household. Um, no, so okay, so avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, ARFID,
Hmm.
transition from I think it was feeding disorder, infancy and early childhood
Hmm.
disorder. That was it, the DSM-4. And so it shifted to ARFID in 2013 by the DSM-5.
Hmm.
And it's just like a feeding disturbance or a lack, like something like a lack of interest in food, like aversive consequences, like maybe you've had trauma around food, like, choking or like an allergy attack, like an anaphylactic response, and now you have anxiety or fear responses around that. It can also just be like avoidance based on sensory characterizations, right? Like in the autism community, we hear a lot of that. And then it's usually, so it's got this psychosocial component connected with a nutritional deficiency of some kind, usually. So, like, maybe they have it like a particular significant nutritional deficiency, like in a particular category, sorry. Maybe they have significant weight loss or they're not meeting a growth expectation. They have like a dependence on maybe a feeding tube of some kind or a nutritional supplement of some kind. Um, or maybe they just have some like avoidance behaviors of mealtime or verbalizing anxiety around that. Um, so I think that's ARFID. And I think what's missing from that diagnosis purposely is the some kind of medical attribution. So that's when we
Hmm.
jump over to pediatric feeding disorder. Pediatric feeding disorder, I said 2013 for ARFID. pediatric feeding disorder is 2019. So
Woo!
yeah, when we go back to like our our different disciplines and clinical evidence bases, we're all talking about feeding issues or eating
Mhm.
issues or mealtime challenges. We're talking about that in different ways. Like,
Right.
you know, speech therapists are talking about swallowing challenges and ABA is talking about um consumption and just mealtime disturbances contextually. And then, the dietitians are talking about nutritional deficiencies. Gastroenterologists are talking about um, particular disorders and how the care of them long term creates different disturbances. So we all were talking
Right.
about them in different ways. But the problem was we were all talking about them in different ways. Like it was all siloed. And so in 2019, Feeding Matters created this initiative by a bunch of different people. It's a seminal article. It's Good Day et al. 2019.
We can list it in
And
the show notes. I'll have to make a little.
yes, I have I have a website, two seminal articles, and
Oh my
anything
gosh.
else I say
Girl,
that I'm
yeah,
going to
can
give
you
you
share
guys.
it with me? Because I'll link them in the show notes for
Yeah.
anyone that is, curious.
Well, and I think to those, I always send parents with those to pediatricians, and I'll expand on
Beautiful.
that in a second. um, because it helps with the definitions, it helps with the overlap between PFD and RFID, and it also helps with a potential framework to look at it through
Yeah.
um, when we talk about which clinicians to go to when.
Hmm.
So, okay, so then you've got, so pediatric feeding disorder is, all it is a oral intake issue that's not developmentally appropriate. So it has a simple little sentence, but then it's characterized by four domains, which is medical, a medical disruption, a nutritional dysfunction, feeding skills, like so,
Okay.
uh, and then psychosocial, right? And so you have these four domains. If RFID really only plays with two domains, it plays
Hmm.
with the nutritional and the psychosocial.
Right.
But with pediatric feeding disorder, PFD, it plays with potentially all four of those
Hmm.
domains. And that
That's,
could look like medical,
yeah.
you could go back to that gastroenterologist. You could have some kind of EOE or gosh, there's now the I'm trying to bring up one.
The
Uh,
millions of acronyms too. It's like
yeah,
there's so
like
many.
a
You're,
yeah,
the
but
ABC, EOE,
yes,
everything. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. There's so many of
So
them.
yeah, you've got all these potential medical needs, right? And then
Yeah.
that's where you've got your allergists, your pediatricians, your um I have a team with a wonderful gastroenterologist. That's why he keeps popping up in my head.
Yeah.
But
Amazing.
and then feeding skills, that's where you've got like your other rehabs, like your occupational therapy, your speech therapy, and even physical therapy. I had a team with a physical therapist when it really talked about posture and movement before because they had some really large constipation challenges.
I was about to say, yeah, digestion. I bet that would be very, very beneficial.
Exactly. And
So
so,
you
yeah,
bring up the silo piece. I love, and I want to do a call out to that because
yeah.
you mentioned, with PFD being such a new diagnosis, really, and the silo piece of it, do you think that that's why so many pediatricians